Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Real Estate and Murder.
Yeah, welcome back.
Hi, Amy Rochelle. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. Okay, well, this is going to be the part 2 episode of our case on Lindsay Busiak. And we felt like it was important to split it up a little bit so we could get all the information out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of information.
There is a lot. And so we wanted to make sure that our audience heard as much as we know in like a timeline that wasn't super overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So in part 2, we're going to talk about some of the suspects, the persons of interest, and the alternate theories. And I just want to say right up front that as we're going into this next section, me and Amy, as we're talking here, are relaying what we've researched, seen, heard, and listened to.
Yeah.
We are not personally involved in this case, so we are not accusing anyone of these crimes. And we will use the language suspects or person of interest as correctly as we can.
Yeah.
But we're just relaying the information.
Well, in full disclosure, police haven't named any persons
one
of
specific one.
interest
Yeah.
or suspects.
Well, I mean, we know who the 2 suspects are, but
yeah.
other involved parties or the names of suspects.
Well, we don't know the
we just don't
names of the 2 clients.
We don't know.
In air quotes.
So just as a disclaimer, we will do our best to make sure that we are not trying to like pinpoint one person, right? We're just telling the story.
We're not coming out accusing.
We're telling the story.
Yeah.
And when we get to our alternate theories, we are retelling other people's stories. Or if we're sharing our own theories, it's speculation. So there's your disclaimer. All right, let's get right into it so we can get the rest of this story out.
Yeah.
Should we? Okay, Amy, you're going to tell us a little bit about the persons of interest and or suspects, right?
Yeah, we're going to start with Jason Zalo, who is Lindsay's boyfriend. And we're starting with him. We're going to work our way with those that were closest to Lindsay and then work our way kind of out. That kind of made sense in our heads to kind of do it that way. But Jason was immediately really taken into police custody. I guess we'll use the word here. He was never arrested.
Right. They asked him to go to the station.
As far as we know, like he was put in a police car and taken for questioning, not as
a suspect.
No, but
person
because he was a firsthand eyewitness. And
yes, absolutely.
Was at the scene. Absolutely. Okay, so Jason's taken to the police station immediately following the murder and questioned for what Jason describes as hours and hours. And we've seen police interviews, like sometimes they'll hold people there and there's usually not a window. And so you kind of lose all concept of time. But Jason feels like it was a really long time.
He's also done a lot of like follow-up interviews and even recorded videos with the police. Like
he walked police through the scene, and you can actually see partial of that video online when you search it.
So for all intents and purposes, he's been extremely cooperative.
Cooperative is a great word.
Yeah.
He has stated that he has taken a polygraph test and turned over his phone to the police. And like we just mentioned, there's a video of Jason's reenactment of what happened when he entered into the home. And so it's all the stuff that kind of happened online. And then as he entered in, and the video cuts when he gets to the top of the staircase. And then he's also turned over his laptop that he and Lindsay shared. And I will state that 2 days after the Dateline episode aired, Saanich Police held a press conference announcing that no member of the Zalo family is considered a person of interest or suspect in this investigation.
And they've stuck to that.
Yeah, I mean, they've had a lot of people go through in and out of their police department, but I find it fascinating that police would rule out publicly someone so quickly.
Absolutely.
Into like a crime that is still 16 years.
And maybe there's something we don't know, but from what we do know, they ruled him out and they've stuck to their guns. Yeah,
and I think a lot of it, I mean, polygraphs in the U.S., I don't know about British Columbia law, but polygraphs are notoriously unreliable. They're not
absolutely
submissible in court.
Admissible.
Thank you.
Same thing.
It's okay.
It's great.
We're going to have English lessons.
We're professionals.
Yes, too. But I want to talk about the laptop.
Okay, you talk about that, and then I'm going to talk about the GPS.
Yes,
Okay.
perfect. Okay, so these are documents that were obtained by Capital Daily, and they had to actually take the Saanich Police Department to court for multiple years to kind of recover these 1,500 pages.
And they did it on their own dime.
Yeah, it cost them a lot of money to do this.
And then they got these documents that were very, very often redacted.
Like pages.
So
sometimes.
frustrating.
And they've gone to court a couple of times, but the judges ruled against them every time because this is, like we said, the active case. But anyway, it shows that the items in the laptop had been deleted or missing. And Technology Crime Unit found that data related to internet chat communications had recently been deleted. Missing documents from the, quote, My Documents part of the hard drive where a folder was called My Received Files was empty. They also found a page file on the computer that contained password processing. I don't even know how to say that word, you guys. I'm so sorry.
However you want. Activity,
emails, and internet browsing activity. Much of what the technological, oh my gosh, you guys, I promise I speak English. Crime Unit found had been redacted in court documents. They concluded that there were chat messages at one time, but they had since been released. Social media posts on Lindsay's Facebook had been deleted sometime prior to police gaining access. The missing posts from roughly 700 friends Lindsay had began roughly 2 weeks before her murder, from about January 24th, 2008 to February 3rd, 2008. So to just break that down, 2 weeks of her social media activity and like what is posted on her Facebook wall was deleted. And according to documents obtained by Capital Daily, again, Saanich police requested the deleted messages and posts from Facebook. Facebook appeared to have let the officers know that only someone with Lindsay's login access could have deleted those messages. It is unknown to the public what erased data Facebook was able to provide to police. And we've kind of talked about this before because now that social media, 2008, social media was just kind of beginning to be a thing. But now, like, even platforms like Snapchat, even though the message is deleted in 24 hours, it's not gone.
Where does it go?
I think Snapchat holds it.
I thought the whole point of Snapchat was to not hold it.
Yeah, apparently not. Apparently they keep it.
Oh my goodness. I fall for everything.
Yeah.
I do. Okay, so just to give like a little bit of context before I comment on what you just went over, this stuff is being brought up or is being noted because some people, whomever, find Jason to be a person of interest, even though he's been cleared by the police. So other parties potentially taking out like a murder for hire, right? Or having some type of involvement, but not being the direct like cause of her death, right? So, and why I think that's kind of important. So I will say I go back and forth a little bit on like, could he have done it? Could he not have? Yeah. He would have had her blood all over him as he's like holding her body and doing CPR, he said, right?
He did say he was doing CPR on her.
So that like brings up the question, but I do want to say that the murder weapon was not found at the scene.
No.
So they couldn't have, Jason and Cohen or one of them couldn't have committed the murder, disposed of that, and then...
See, and I don't think anybody has ever said Jason was actually the killer. I think the public... I guess we'll say public, but it's very vague public. But
right.
Kind of honed in on, most murders are done by someone that you know.
Right.
I don't know the statistic on that.
Yeah. Or to say he had involvement.
Yeah. But even involvement, there would be a money trail somewhere where cash payment was made to someone. And police have been really quiet about the money. In fact, I haven't read anything or seen anything where police really talk about a money trail that they're looking at.
So they've been really quiet about the non-existent money trail.
But
as far as we know.
yeah,
I'm not gonna say
but if you think of like,
no one's mentioned one.
yeah, if you think about a murder, it's crime of passion, over
Of
money.
course.
Like there's certain motives.
But a murder trail. Sorry, hold on. A paper trail, if there was a transaction done here, would have led to a receiver.
Yeah.
Right. And so then we would know who committed the murder.
Yeah.
And I guess it's possible, especially in real estate, when you're doing transactions of large amounts, if you're racking up cash somewhere, it could have been a cash exchange that didn't have a money trail because there was no bank withdrawal.
Yeah.
But so the whole reason, like, circle back, I don't personally think that like all of the erasing of data or her social media stuff is that relevant. And here's why. Like you said, in 2008, social media wasn't as, or the general public wasn't as well versed in like how to use these platforms, or the platforms were even not as well versed as they are nowadays. So I don't see it as too far fetched as someone who was panicking or concerned about pointing to themselves or someone else would think, oh, let me just delete this to protect, or to not put myself in the limelight, or to not put Lindsay on blast for where she was or what she was doing. Like, I don't find it that sketchy if, in fact, he didn't have knowledge of the fact that they could be recovered or could not be recovered. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, they just assume if it's deleted, it's gone. And maybe there was things on there that, Lindsay or someone else, whoever had access to her, because we don't know if Lindsay deleted something
sure,
by accident or on purpose. I don't know. But I mean, she clearly couldn't have deleted stuff
after her death. Yeah.
Yeah. February 3rd or whatever. But yeah, I don't know that you think like, oh, that can be retrievable. But we know, I mean, if the police still have the laptop, like, unless you have it really scrubbed clean.
Right.
Which there isn't time to have it professionally scrubbed clean.
Right.
I would say from the time frame of Jason turning over the laptop.
Sure.
So there's got to be some sort of like evidence on it somewhere.
Reason. Yeah. Sure, that makes sense. Again, back to the alternate theory or theory, whatever, that Jason was potentially involved in a murder for hire plot, or that someone had done it for him or his family or whomever as a favor. Man, that's a tough one for me. I think the GPS, and I'll go into that for just a second if it's okay.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
The fact that Jason tried to enter the address into the GPS and couldn't get it in, and it was wrong.
Because of the new...
He didn't know where it was,
location.
Is my point.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people with Jason had a problem with him at the beginning.
Right.
In several episodes and whatever is out there is because him and Cohen weren't necessarily like best friends. He had kind of wanted to go meet Cohen for dinner. Cohen only thought it was dinner. Like you've brought up, like he just ate lunch at 4:20 and now
Sure.
you're meeting someone at 5:30 for lunch. Like, and then Jason says, oh, I've got to go with my girlfriend to do a showing really quick. And they were just kind of hockey acquaintances, maybe,
Right.
is kind of how it's being described. But I honestly think like when someone close to you is murdered, like, your life becomes this like intensive lens that people kind of pick apart. And it could just be like a lot of circumstantial random.
Yeah, that was a really, really good way to say that.
Yeah.
It becomes a lens on your personal life.
Microscoped.
And a romantic partner is always going to be a person of interest.
Well, yeah,
Good.
I mean,
Right.
they have,
But again, like people again, so like you said, kind of the vague public, right? Did all this speculating online on like what do you would call platforms, threads, Jeff's website. We're proposing all these theories like, well, Jason had to be involved and here's why. He ran right up the stairs. He is in real estate. He was, Lindsay was about to break up with him, which we know that that's a part of the story, was that she was considering breaking up with him.
She had told a friend.
And her dad.
She was going to break up with him. And yeah, she had told her dad weeks before that she was having second guesses about their relationship. Jason swears in any interview he does that there was no inclination
that he didn't know
that she was going to break up with him, which also isn't uncommon. Like,
I mean, I don't give anyone that I've dated a heads up either, though.
Like, in 2 weeks, we're going to break up.
Look, I'm going to get back to you about this, but I'm pretty much considering, you know. So that's fair. I mean, he probably wouldn't know.
Yeah. And they lived together, and he never said anything was awkward. I'm sure Jason, truthfully, has a lot of guilt because he was right outside.
Yeah, like I said, I find one of the most tragic parts of this case to be that they were literally within proximity of the killers.
Yeah.
Close proximity. And within seconds and or minutes, they could have crossed paths, caught them. I mean, two hockey players that are young, fit, in good shape could have stopped and sat on a suspect and waited, right? Like, they wouldn't have just let them run off, I would think.
Yeah.
You don't see two people leaving the home. You're concerned, you've already called 911, you're panicked, and you're like, oh, that's no big deal. Let them go. No way, right?
Yeah.
So I find that to be very tragic.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about Shirley Salo, Jason's mom.
Whew. Let's talk about the mama.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, again, like speculation or public opinion about Shirley, her personality type, her relationship to Lindsay, her relationship to her sons. You know, so
Shirley was the manager. I don't know if she still is the manager of Remax, Como's son. I don't even know how to say that, but we're Realty. And Lindsay worked there. Much has been speculated about a house on Shawnigan Lake. And Shirley has stated to Capital Daily that the lake house that she bought, the home from her parents, and Jason and Lindsay lived in the basement of the home but had access to the whole house when no one was there. And I think that that's important to state because if you look on threads on different sites and comb through the earlier versions of the story and the podcast before we had this 1,500 pages of documents released, there was all this speculation that Shirley may have been the one to pay people because she had provided Lindsay and Jason with financial means and they had this nice house that they had access to. And she
So you mean pay people for a murder for hire?
Exactly.
Right, okay.
You know, there's reports that Shirley had paid for Lindsay's breast enhancement surgery or, things like that. I haven't found anything that validates any of those questions.
Sure.
But, as a mom, we're both moms. I can't imagine being so upset with a son's girlfriend that you're going to go out and hire someone to kill them over paying for a breast
augmentation. Yeah. People have pitched that exact theory, though. You're not just chatting here. That is an actual circumstance that people have pitched, is that she was spiteful and didn't like Lindsay, or had maybe gotten word that Lindsay was considering breaking up with him. And so she was angry about the amount of money she had spent on Lindsay. But I mean, murder for hire plots happen all the time for all different types of relationships. But with what we know about Lindsay and with her age and her inexperience in life in general as a 24-year-old, she hadn't done anything drastically awful or disgusting to make somebody want
to kill her.
Yeah. Except one of the alternate theories, which we'll get into. A little bit of breadcrumbs there.
Yeah, I do feel like, obviously as a mama bear, I can see why Shirley has come out swinging in defense of her son.
And she has.
Yeah. And I think that in and of itself can make her an easy target to be villainized. But I also I don't know. To me, it's it's kind of
pretty loose.
Yeah, I don't know.
Here's why there's a possible connection there.
Sure.
She was the manager of the brokerage office or whatever that Lindsay was working with. It is one of the most supported theories that this murder was real estate related somehow. And Lindsay's father, Jeff, has made that very clear that that's his opinion on it.
Yes, because of the specific Lindsay's cell phone and the specific client name
that's what I mean. Yeah. So let's
dropped.
do a little bit of real estate insight here.
Sure.
So when, at least nowadays, but let's assume it was very similar back then, since real estate is similar in general in transactions. Technology has shifted a lot of the way we do things in transactions now, but the same thing stands, whether it was 2008 or 2024, that when you are doing transactions with clients, you have a lot of personal information, their names, phone numbers, addresses, and potentially financial information and more. And so the very odd fact that the female suspect who made the phone calls to Lindsay referenced a specific referral
who happened to be out of the country.
And could not be reached by Lindsay to verify. Exactly. So the theory is Shirley would have access to her client database because managers, brokers, team leads, they do have access to the files of the agents that they manage for transparency purposes, for checking over work and making sure everything's accurate and correct, right? And so Shirley, in theory, could have set up, planned, and pulled names and put people in place to validate that this referral was legit.
Well, and Lindsay did tell her father on one of her last trips, or the last trip she made to Calgary, "Dad, I saw something I shouldn't have." And she didn't elaborate on that. And we don't know if that means some sort of real estate fraud or
we don't know
other things.
We're going to talk about it in the theories a little bit too, or the proposed theories a little bit, because there's some very good potential there.
Yeah. And like we said, everybody knows everybody. So
on this island,
Lindsay's mom is actually pretty good friends with Shirley. Shirley at one point had dated Joe D'Souza, who was the developer of the cul-de-sac. And so kind of everybody's kind of like intertwined.
Yeah, it's almost like Shirley has as much ties to Lindsay as Jason does.
Yeah.
But they're not dating.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up the Shirley part really quick, I just want to say that Jeff Busiak has been pretty open about the fact, and I did watch this on the Brain Scratch YouTube video, which I found fascinating. I highly recommend, if you're interested in this case, to go look at them. I'm not familiar with the host of the video, who's does a podcast like this, but
interviewed Jeff a handful of times.
He's interviewed him multiple times, and he's very genuine and very interested in what Jeff has to say and in getting to the truth instead of the misguided facts. So I think he's a very legitimate source in this story, but he was interviewing Jeff in the most recent one, which wasn't too long ago. And Jeff was very open about the fact that he and Shirley very strongly dislike each other. They've had a very public, volatile, separation of any kind of friendship. Jeff states that Shirley proposed that they be friends at some point after Lindsay's murder, and that she was just too difficult to be friends with, and so it blew up right away, which can either play into Shirley has potential guilt, or Shirley is a very difficult person to get along with, therefore she conflicts with people like Lindsay.
Yeah, this is a highly emotion, and you can't get past the high emotion end,
So it is just interesting. Jeff does also note that Evelyn, who is Lindsay's mother, and Shirley have a better relationship, at least in his eyes.
Yeah,
and he and Evelyn do not.
Since you bring up Evelyn did give a rare interview with Capital Daily on one of their articles, and she comes out in support of the Zalos. She doesn't think that they did anything. And she has publicly stated that she isn't thrilled with how her ex-husband, Jeff, had been kind of villainizing and releasing public accusations.
Sure. But I can totally see, and we won't get into that too much because it's not relevant to the murder probably, but I would imagine that because of the devastation of losing a child, especially in such a violent way, it's not far-fetched to think that the two parents of that child could handle the situation incredibly differently, because nobody can gauge the amount of grief or trauma or how one parent or the other would handle.
Yeah, everybody handle grief
this. Right. So Evelyn's been pretty quiet by choice, which I absolutely respect and understand, whereas Jeff has been very vocal and in the public, which
I also understand.
Yeah, exactly. So does that kind of wrap up the Shirley section?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. Who's next?
So Cohen Oatman, he, like we've just said, we're just going to mention him briefly just because he was interviewed.
But he was never a suspect.
He was never a suspect. But yeah, they
was on
took
scene.
him. Yeah, they took him in, validated his story. Yeah, I mean, he was just kind of an unwilling eyewitness, I guess.
Unwilling eyewitness, exactly.
He was just there to go to lunch and just happened to be a part of, and I'm sure he wishes that
he hadn't been.
Yeah. So we're going to switch kind of gears and go kind of out a little bit.
Out of her circle.
Out of her like immediate circle.
Yeah.
She had an ex-boyfriend called Matt McDuff, and he was also interviewed early on in the Dateline episode and publicly stated a couple things. Lindsay's friends have stated that Lindsay wanted to break up with Jason to get back together with Matt. They called Matt her quote unquote Mr. Big. If you're friends of Sex and the City.
Right, like the love of her life.
Yeah, you'll kind of know. Matt and Lindsay, Matt has admitted that they had a very volatile, I know we've used that word before, but a very volatile relationship.
At times.
Yeah. Some physical altercations, although he never really admitted that, like how physical.
He does say pretty outright on Dateline, from what I can recall, that he never hit or touched Lindsay, but that she had hit or tried to engage him physically, but that he never did. And you can go look at that yourself and reference it. But
yeah, regardless, he does use the word, like they just had a very, we'll say toxic.
Up and down relationship. Yeah. And I do want to point out they were super young. Yeah. Right? Because Lindsay died.
They started dating when she was 19 or something.
I think it was younger than that, like 16. Lindsay was 24 when she died, and she had been dating Jason for a little while. They lived together. So, I believe it was a couple years. So, a significant amount of time. That would have put her at, let's say, 22.
Yeah.
Right? And if she was with Matt McDuff in a relationship for, I believe it said 6 years, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, 4 or 6 years. It was a good chunk of time. So they were very young. That's a very emotional and difficult time as you're figuring out relationships.
Or figuring out yourself. I mean,
both.
Yeah. I mean, do we all have it together when we're 19?
Not at all. And the relationship
I mean, we do, but
that I had at that age was my most difficult and challenging one that I've ever had. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
We're just saying there's nothing suspicious there. Matt was cleared immediately and has never been looked at again.
He was actually on another part of the island with his girlfriend at the time with her family, and there was multiple witnesses, and he doesn't come out and really talk about it very much anymore. He's married and has kids, and you can understand. I mean, in the interviews that he was doing pretty early on after her death, like he's very emotional. You can tell that, her passing had an effect on him.
Of course, but that he wanted to keep his distance from the case.
Yeah. And I guess lastly, like Joe D'Souza, who
was the developer of
the neighborhood. He told police that he had been in the home prior to the showing. He had been checking the doors and windows, and he saw nothing out of place. Joe provided fingerprints and footprints, and he gave police consent to enter the property. I will say that if he's there checking on everything, and he leaves at 4:30, about that time, it's a little bit light outside, fairly light, probably. I would
Sun
think
setting.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they did say summer
He
sun was
never
setting.
noted that he saw the broken fence.
Right, in the backyard.
Yeah. So, I mean, if he's checking doors and windows, I think he's making sure everything's locked up tight.
Sure.
So it makes sense why Jason and Cohen can't get into a basement door.
Right.
And, you know.
Yeah, but again, he was cleared very quickly, very early on. He did have, and I'm assuming still does have ties to Shirley. So he was looped in, you know what I mean? But we won't spend any more time on him because he doesn't have any more really appearances in the case. And there are just a couple other, we'll get into the other persons of interest a little bit more as we're telling the story of the alternate theories, just because we don't have enough information to really say like Lindsay crossed paths with this person.
I will say though, the police have come out and said, before we even get started with the alternate theories, because there was some speculation about some drug connections, and they have come out and said that Lindsay was never, there's not any evidence that she was into drugs, that she, you know, had anything to do with the drug world or was like an informant or anything like that, other than the fact that she knows people that were in that world.
Yeah. And so we would, just to bring them up really quick, and then let's move on to the theories. One of the big characters in the drug world on this island and in this area was a drug dealer with a violent history, actual charges, right, is named Ziggy, or that's his nickname.
Zachary Scott Matheson is his full name.
Right. And there was another man, I just want to say briefly to make sure that Jeff gets I don't want to say credit, but the things that he feels and says are acknowledged. In that brain scratch video, the latest one as well, he did mention another man that has been a person of interest that was tied into Ziggy somehow, again, in the drug culture, drug world. And this man has been very disrespectful and outright rude about this case. I do not remember his name. I apologize that I don't remember his name, but at the same time, I don't want to give him any attention or light in this scenario because he has been very rude and disrespectful.
Aggressive.
So, but if you're interested in more of what Jeff has to say about that person, go ahead and look up that brain scratch video on YouTube. It was pretty good. So, all right. I mean, that's what we know in terms of people of interest and suspects, kind of the potential players in this. So let's move on. Amy, let's talk about some alternate theories. Let's maybe talk about the alternate theories that the police and the public that are involved locally have proposed before I talk about my own.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Well, should we talk about drugs?
Yeah. What do you want to talk about?
So basically what we've been able to figure out, and I say basically because you can go down this rabbit hole of this cartels. I guess we'll use the word cartels.
The word cartels has been used in these sources.
So there was basically two separate kind of drug theories that were going on. Lindsay went and visited her dad in Calgary shortly before, I want to say it was November-ish of 2007. And she had made contact with some old friends of hers. Well, there happened to be this intensive investigation that had been spanning over years. And there was an informant that kind of led police in. And the speculation was that Lindsay ended up being the informant and that she was killed because of this information. And the police were they came out and really quickly cleared Lindsay.
They could prove that she wasn't an informant.
Not the informant. But we're talking about the seizure of 80 kilograms of cocaine worth about $8 million. So, I mean, it wasn't like a small drug bust. So that's why that kind of led there. There's also one that was happening closer to her place, like in Victoria. And that was kind of being headed, the trial went on, like Ziggy was kind of arrested and there was estimated street value. He served some time in jail. the street value that I have in my notes is $500K. I know Sarah has some like differing information there, but there was people in her life that were doing things. But I think if you go back to just such a small circle and everybody knows everybody, like, of course you would have contacts with people. And at 24, like, you're friends with a lot of people that may or may not be doing things that you agree with. And the thing that I think highlights Ziggy the most is that Shirley Zala was his landlord.
But
she swears up and down she did not know him. But there are pictures of Ziggy with both Jeff and his brother that are posted on the internet.
You mean Jason?
Oh, Jason. Sorry.
Jason, hockey. They were related in the hockey team.
Yeah, they were on the hockey team together.
Yeah, I think you made a good point that I wanted to touch on as well. At 24 years old, and we do know that Lindsay was a very social person. Her friend Nikki talks about that and does say, and they even show in the Dateline episode, they did like to go out and quote unquote party, which means like interacting at clubs, probably consuming alcohol. And so you're not wrong to say like it's likely that she crossed paths with people in the drug culture and community, and or there might have been some minor experimentation in that world. Lindsay was not known to be a drug user.
Yeah, her family has clearly stated she was like anti-drug.
Sure, and there's nothing found in her system.
Dated people. She was attracted to people that were also
right
anti-drug.
So we're just saying she could have been kind of coincidentally almost tied into this community.
Well, I mean, think about it. Like your younger years, high school, college, like that group of people that like I'm sure you had friends or acquaintances that were doing things that you weren't necessarily doing, but you were still friends with them.
I do think that this is actually a very viable road to go down, this drug culture community, because if Lindsay said, and she actually stated more than once, I believe it was twice, to people in her life that she saw something she shouldn't have. Now, if we're tying these together, I would personally think if she witnessed a large amount of drugs either being sold or stashed, right? And we know that the street value of the one drug bust that you mentioned was up to $8 million. That is a lot of drugs.
It's a ton.
And so if she did see something that she wasn't supposed to, and that threatened someone who was deeply involved in that community or culture, it is not unthinkable that she could have been murdered because she had witnessed or was too close to the situation and the story.
See, and this is my problem with the drug theory. And I can only speak from our experience with watching the news here in the U.S. Drug dealers don't go in, set up this elaborate ruse, hire two people or have the two people themselves show up, get someone to a vacant house, and then stab them.
I get where you're going. It's like a lot of premeditation is not what you typically see.
Drug dealers are like, I mean, at least from what we've, like, their guns, their drive-by shootings,
or execution style murders, which would be more like a bullet wound, 2 to the head, 1 in the heart.
Yeah.
But I'm going to fight you a little bit here.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Just because I think it actually is viable. I mean, you're absolutely right that in murder for hire and typically in drug retaliation murders, they are quick. They don't have like a long, couple of days of trust building with the victim. Yeah. Although, we're not speaking from experience, we're telling the story, but, typically from what we know, they're quick, they're hard, and they're fast executions. However, one of the things that makes the least sense to me in this case is the method of Lindsay's death, because the amount of stab wounds is so brutal.
Yeah.
Also known to be personal.
I will say the pre-planning of her murder was so well thought out, but the execution part seems very sloppy, messy, maybe
Except that they got away with it.
I mean, they did.
I mean, I know what you mean.
And ultimately, you know, and then the getaway, like they were just going to leave through the front door and then they went through the back and kicked through slats. Like, I don't know, like that part of it just seems, it seems like it's two separate like cases.
Roads.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will go a little bit more into that when I'm sharing one of my theories. However, I see exactly what you're saying. If this was a revenge killing though, because whomever wanted to make sure that she was taught a lesson, right, as they say, or that others who were in her circle were now in fear, that actually does make sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it could go either way because we don't have more than these loose ties to one way or the other, right?
I will say, since we're talking about the drugs, I wanted to highlight more about this phone that the police have dubbed the crime phone.
Yeah, this is actually really important.
Yeah. So through court documents, we know a lot more about the phone than previously thought.
The phone that was used to do this communicating between the couple and Lindsay.
Yes. The service provider is Virgin Mobile, and the police obtained initial data from Lindsay's BlackBerry, including the caller's number. A court application asked them, Virgin Mobile, to turn over their subscriber information. The police learned the phone was a prepaid phone purchased in November 2007 from a Vancouver convenience store. It was activated online shortly before the first call to Lindsay on January 31st, 2008. Registration of the phone was made under the name Paulo Rodriguez, which turned out to be fake. By the time police went to the convenience store where the phone was purchased, the surveillance footage showing the sale of the phone was gone. Dateline had been given access to the same information. Police have been able to triangulate the calls from the phone as it hit off cell towers. However, what information they were able to gather from the phone, we can only speculate, but probably the course the phone traveled has not been released. Jeff has given interviews stating he was told that the phone traveled by ferry and stayed the night near a drug dealer's residence. Saanich police determined the name of at least one person in possession of the quote crime phone, who was known to facilitate illegal activity in a covert manner. And that's like a specific quote that they had released. Nothing in the public record indicates whether police considered this person a suspect in Lindsay's murder. The phone was deactivated after Lindsay's murder and has not been used again. And if I'm remembering correctly, that person whose phone it stayed with that night is also the person that Jeff kind of confronted, that's Lindsay's dad, and was really aggressive, because there are people that actually know what is going on.
Yeah, of course.
Or at least more than what they're saying.
Yeah, absolutely, which Jeff has stated. And he actually said what I consider to be kind of a beautiful quote at the end of his Brain Scratch interview, where he basically said, this crime will only be solved if the people who know what happened come forward. Mm-hmm. If someone speaks, then they will be the hero of this story. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was a very eloquent thing to say. What else do we need to get into before I go down my...
I think we're ready.
I think
we're ready.
For this?
I think the audience is ready to hear.
I mean, it could be controversial. And, I'm just speaking about the things that I'm hearing and reading versus what I'm deducing on my own, right? Like,
sure.
That's all I can do. That's the best I can do. I think there's a very good possibility that this crime occurred because of the drug involvement, or, and I know this is where I lose you a little bit, but let's see if I can convince you. Or I think there is a possibility, I think there's an argument at least for this murder being a thrill kill by a couple that enjoys or enjoyed perpetuating a violent crime.
Really?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. And so I know. And I want to just say right now, not that Jeff is ever going to listen to my opinion about that, like my version of this.
Yeah. Well, our opinions don't really matter.
That's what I mean. So I absolutely want to respect that he has come out and said very adamantly that he believes that this murder was real estate related. And of course he knows more. Of course he does. I'm pitching this
though, because they know the names of.
Of course. I'm pitching this as an alternate theory because I'm just pitching it for something else to discuss, to come up against, well, here's the other thing that happened. It was real estate related or drug related, but we have zero proof. So this alternate theory is really just to give that like something to contend with, right?
Yeah, I think that the drug thing, it's kind of gone like in circles. And we've kind of mentioned before, like it feels like it may be a red herring. There's a lot of threads that as you pull the drug issue, it could be a possibility. But a lot of things don't make sense. So let's hear about your thrill kill theory.
Okay. All right. So the first thing that kind of leads me down this road is that we do know there was an extreme amount of premeditation that went into this.
Oh, 100%.
We also know that the phone that was used to communicate with Lindsay back and forth over the weekend was purchased, almost 4 hours away from Lindsay's death.
And 2 months.
And 2 months in advance. That there
like
speaks
timestamp.
Because so it was purchased. Let's just say it was purchased 2 months in advance. We know, but it also wasn't turned on.
So let me ask
and registered or used until right before the murder. So they bought it, left it sitting while they came up with the details. Is my theory, and then activated the phone when they needed to use it.
So do you think they went to Saanich or close by and kind of followed Lindsay? Like, how would they know? How would they know her? I mean, how would they get her cell phone number? Here's
why.
Okay.
Thanks for asking. I do not think it's beyond the scope of possibility that Lindsay was not specifically targeted, but a real estate agent was targeted because, like you said earlier, real estate agents are known to be interacting with strangers where there isn't a lot of contact necessarily before, and maybe they don't ever have contact with that potential client ever again. How often, let's bring our real estate experience back into this. It happens where a lead, we call them, so someone you don't know reaches out to you and says they're interested in buying a home or they'd like to do a showing, and then you never hear from them again. Yeah. It happens.
Or you show them and then they ghost you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not that far-fetched. A real estate agent would be a great target for a thrill kill.
Giving people ideas.
It's my idea, and I have to say it, or it's gonna just drive me nuts. And there's more reasons. Hold on, there's more reasons. Yeah, that's true. Don't ever call real estate agents and then kill them. That's not my idea. I'm going to back that up. Also, I think you asked like where they would have gotten her information. It's not beyond the scope of possibility that it was a valid referral. What if that's
who they're targeting, and so they...
Yeah, that client. So say you're a couple that wants to commit a violent crime that you cannot be tied to. So you're not going to kill a family member or friend. You're going to pick an innocent human being. And someone, maybe even indirectly, who did a transaction with a real estate agent. You don't even care who the real estate agent is, but they're far enough away from you that information could have actually been passed on either even by accident or intentionally. Say the actual, valid referral that had done business with Lindsay before that the suspects claimed gave the contact information of Lindsay's cell phone to them, could have given it to somebody else, and it trickled down to this thrill kill couple who was like, oh, we have the name and contact information of an agent.
Because I was just going to come at you, actually. I was going to be like, Sarah,
do it.
Don't you think that if you had someone call you asking for a referral and that referral dies, that you wouldn't tell police like, oh, so-and-so asked me for a referral and now they're dead?
Right. So in my business, 5 years into it now, I have client referrals that I have done transactions with 2 and 3 times fold. So like I have done transactions with clients 2, 3, 4 years ago who then refer me to a family member, who then refer me to a friend, who then refer me to somebody that I have no idea who they are.
Yeah,
but that person doesn't know where the first referral came from.
But they're still giving the same name.
But here it's a word of mouth thing. So let's just give like some names to help track what I'm thinking here. So say Susie is the client that did business legitimately with Lindsay. Then Susie gives the contact information to her friend Bobby. And then Bobby gives the contact information or leaves it somewhere and it gets to someone named Craig. Craig would have no clue who Susie is. So information can get passed along by word of mouth that still could be traced or tracked back or potentially planted somewhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think the only way that would be working is if you're sitting in a cafe and you hear someone talk about, oh, I have a great agent. Her name is Lindsay. Let me give it to you. And if someone overhears it, because I think if anybody has given her name and then she finds out they're murdered, they would have been one of the, 2,000 entities.
Sure, but
that have given information to police.
Say you're premeditating this murder, you're planning it for months on end. It's not that like difficult to scour the internet, especially like you even noted earlier, Lindsay had Facebook.
Yeah.
You can tie people back.
And they never said if her account was private or not. That's a
good
point, actually.
And you let's not pretend there aren't hackers and people out there that are a lot smarter than like your average Joe who doesn't deal with technology on a regular basis that could access people's private information like cell phone bills. It's going amazing. To certain addresses.
It's shocking what people will put out on the internet about themselves.
That's what I'm saying. Or what someone who's very smart and methodical could find if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Truly. Or if none of this absolutely works for you, I'll still propose that this couple was completely random, that someone engaged them, let's say it was connected to the drug community. So let's just say someone in the drug culture said, we've got to kill Lindsay. She saw something she shouldn't see. She knows too much. And we need to teach her inner circle a lesson. Let's find a couple, maybe friend of a family, so-and-so, someone far removed, that's so random it could never be tied back. And then that couple who still enjoys violent crimes because they obviously set one up was like, opportunity of a lifetime, date night. We need 3 months to plan this out. Seriously, though.
This is wild to me.
But it's not that far-fetched that if you're going to take out a hit on someone because they've seen something and they know too much, but you have to make sure it's not tied back to you, you're going to find a random person. And in the drug community and culture, there's a lot of known violence. It's not that hard to find the name of someone who is a violent human being that does favors for people.
Yeah, a hitman.
A hitman, someone who's just well known to be that guy that you call when you need a favor done, but he's not involved in your drug trade. He's doing like a mafia hitman almost.
Yeah.
They're never in the mafia, they're hitmen. So that's not that far-fetched either. Now, I know that the core of this conversation and Lindsay's close ones probably don't think that's even a possibility, but I think that it's not completely out of the realm of possibility because, let's just go into a few more things, not just the premeditation, but also the extreme violence in this case, because again, 12, 20, 30, or 54 stab wounds is incredibly violent and unnecessary.
Yeah, by one weapon.
With one weapon.
No sexual assault.
And if you're first-time killers, I would think you'd trip up or make a mistake somewhere that would get you caught or tracked. These guys were methodical, thought it through, and we have no clue to this day who they are. That speaks to some kind of experience doing what they did. Mm-hmm. So I think the violence also can contribute to that.
I still think, though, at the end of the day, someone knows something.
Of course someone knows something, because even at least they know something.
Yeah.
Or the client that referred Lindsay knows something. Yeah. Or there's so many possibilities. So I'll let that one sit right there for now. I think it's a fascinating potential for a lot of different reasons.
I think we'll pitch it back to the audience. Audience, just message us. Let us know. Like, leave a comment. Yeah. Let us know what your theory is.
Yeah, please do. Because I think you can tie some of these clues together enough to say there's something worth looking at in that theory, you know? So just to, you know, we're going to start to wrap this up a little bit, because we've given a lot of information. And
we have, and we don't know all the details. Unfortunately, for this being our first episode, like, her murder is still unsolved. 16 years later.
Yes, it is.
Her murder is still unsolved. And so I think that's why there's so much speculation.
Yeah. And I'm going to give you one more juicy tidbit that you think I'm wild for thinking. And then we can kind of wrap it down. Besides, I truly believe the most fascinating part of this case for me personally is the exit for the people who committed this crime. And maybe we're way off, and the police do know for a fact they ran out the patio door, but they've never disclosed that in any of these sources that we've listened to and read.
Well, nothing's been unredacted.
Right. Yeah. So
is that a word?
But we do know that the male was at the front door and then shut the front door. Mm-hmm. Now, if at that point Jason and Cohen moved their vehicle around the home, it's possible that the male said to the female, okay, they just moved, let's go. And they ran out the front door. It's possible that the male suspect saw the vehicle and shut the door and said to the female, we have to go out a different way, and ran out the back. Or my juicy tidbit is, what if they were still in the house
when
Jason and Cohen entered the home, found Lindsay's body, and called the police? Because the timeline is so tight. The timeline is so tight that it like I said, the most tragic part of this is that
it's minutes.
It's within minutes that Jason and Cohen could have actually made face-to-face contact with these killers. And that's what we should be calling them. We keep calling them suspects, but we should just call them killers. They're brutal, vicious killers.
And this is the thing that I don't understand. You've had a head wound, or cut your hand on a piece of paper or whatever, and it, like, you'll step on a piece of glass,
right,
and you find like it drips everywhere. This, we're assuming just one of them, because it was the same knife, stabbed Lindsay. You go out the front door, you touch it, like, there would be blood evidence on
somewhere,
the front door, somewhere leading down. The police initially stated there was no DNA evidence found in the house, but you can't not stab someone multiple times. It doesn't matter how many times, multiple times, and not have, and you know, they've said now that there was DNA evidence. In fact, the FBI got involved in 2001, and we know that there's 3 samples. We don't know what they are. We don't know if it's carpet. We don't know if it's whatever. It has been taken to the lab for testing. DNA results have not been released publicly, whether the police know what it is or not. But I just think like, and maybe it was because it was dark. Jason didn't see that there was blood on the handle, or blood throughout the house, or blood on the back
and that the
patio
police didn't
door.
Collect it.
Yeah. I will say there's a lot of harsh criticism on the Saanich Police Department. A lot of their veteran police officers had retired like the week or so before Lindsay's death.
Correct.
And her case has switched hands multiple times, which could be a good thing for fresh eyes to look at. But like we've said before, it's 16 years and they haven't solved. I will say the police have kept a lot of this evidence close to the chest. And I think that is important because whenever the killer is known or there's evidence to do a conviction, I think they'll have better luck.
Sure. And the extreme lack of at least obvious evidence, like blood on the door, blood on the whatever, right?
Yeah, whatever exit
Again,
point,
to me,
I would think there'd be blood somewhere.
Not unless you're a professional, Amy. You've done this before. You
really think you can stab someone so many times and not have
No,
evidence?
I don't. But I do think you can stab someone 52 times and then your partner who stands behind you and does not stab the person hands you a pair of leather gloves and puts on their own, and then you guys exit. There's 2 people involved in this murder. The police have said, and it's logical, that only one person committed the actual violent act because so much was done so quickly. So it would make sense to like, let's each take a turn. So the partner could have been standing out of the room behind, watching the door with a pair of leather gloves, a pair of booties, a leather jacket to zip up and walk out the front door and have nobody on the ferry or in public see your blood-stained shirt. It is not that far-fetched.
Genius move on
my part.
The killer.
Oh, yeah.
For wearing such a wildly patterned dress because nobody's focusing in on details or the 2 witnesses.
The pattern is distracting.
Yeah. So they only noticed the dress, which happened to be a dress that was sold in shops.
But yeah, I was just going to say, we'll just mention it briefly. Like that seemed to be, I think we can call it a red herring. For a while for the police. They were like, oh, we got to find this dress. It's so unique. It's so rare. Turns out it's not.
And I think they have announced somewhere that they have like a dozen or so of the same dresses.
Yeah. Like
that have been given to them over time. Like,
in custody.
Oh, yeah. Like,
yeah.
Oh, I found this
evidence.
dress in the vintage store. Maybe it contains.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for listening, you guys.
Yeah, we've talked about a lot of really interesting thoughts, ideas. You know, I do want to just wrap this podcast up, and we will with each podcast that we do, tie back in a little bit about our professional insights and just tell each other and tell our audience what our main takeaway is as real estate agents. What did we learn from this? What would we do, you know, if we were in this position, and or give a tip, a safety tip, a piece of advice as agents for our audience to keep it, you know, at the top of their mind when they're doing things like this. So do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think my big takeaway from this case is just how easy it could have been someone else. It could be one of us. It could be one of our colleagues that we know. And I think that hopefully the lesson that is learned is that if you're scared or have those spidey senses that are telling you like something feels off, this doesn't feel right, like you can say no. You don't have to show the client. You can also bring in another agent with you. You can also have someone in the showing, not just waiting outside, or not just, I have a tendency when I'm showing a vacant house to like have someone on the phone, like, hey, like, you know, be on the phone with me real quick while I set the showing up, while I wait for my client. But like, have them go with you. Like, have them in there, or just say no. And I'm not victim shaming Lindsay at all.
Not at all.
I don't feel like she did anything wrong, but she told so many people how nervous she was for this showing. And I feel like that was her knowing, like on some subconscious level, that something wasn't right. And that how often do we not listen to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was my takeaway too. You stole my takeaway.
Sorry.
So I'll just go into that in like a little bit more detail in terms of saying no. Again, like, we're not victim shaming Lindsay for making the decision to go, of course.
I don't think she did anything
Any
wrong.
one of us would have probably done that
100%.
at the same time. But as a real estate agent or someone in a profession where they're exposed to strangers and meetings like this, again, it is not worth what the potential business you've been promised could be to sacrifice your instinct and your gut. And it is okay. Say this client was actually not a killer and they were a legitimate couple moving there with a relocation. It would have been, or I shouldn't say would have been, I'm sorry. It is okay to say to that client or potential client, I would love to show you homes. My schedule is between 10 and 5 p.m. I do not show homes after dark for many reasons, including, and you can say, including the exterior of the home can't be seen. Right, for first time meeting. I'm saying you can give plenty of valid reasons why that is not something you do in your business without being accusatory.
Yeah. Or you could say, like, I would love to meet you. Let's meet at this public place for the first time.
Or I will be bringing my partner with me. Mm-hmm. If you feel like you have a red flag, or just as a standard business practice, if you're showing a home to brand new clients that you've never met before and you kind of have a weird feeling about it, or maybe you don't, you can say to them, again, as part of my business, I always bring a partner with me. Mm-hmm. That way, if the other party, these potential clients, are planning your vicious murder, they now know you might not be a great target. You've got backup coming with you.
Yeah.
So there are many valid ways to set reasonable expectations with clients, whether they're killers or not, to say, this is how I manage my business and I do not deviate from these practices for my safety.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Amy. I'm so excited about this and what we're doing. And I can't wait. We have not yet decided who the next topic of our podcast will be, but we have a list.
We do.
We've got a good going list.
20
and building, because we keep adding, different ways that real estate is involved in crime without it being just agents, right? Mm-hmm. We're going to get into all parts of this. So I'm excited, and thanks for the first episode.
Yeah, thanks.